here. And now I've got addicted to it.
Oh, definitely. It's always good to have a good background.
Yes.
It's so nice to see you, like, in a good shape.
My pleasure. How's everything?
In Baku, it's quite good. Like, slowly it is opening. More availabilities. The restaurants are already opened till 6 p.m. And but I mean, there is lots of problems definitely because it's a global problem. I have some questions, if you don't mind, because we need your expertise and your knowledge. Prime Minister, what do you think about today? We are lacking leadership, a global leadership. We are lacking in a global leadership issue.
That is an understatement.
Because we see there is a mistrust between partners, and we see that there is a blame gaming between countries, and not only the countries, but also we have a problem with international organizations, and they are like World Health Organization, and you can see, definitely better, World Health, United Nations. How it's possible, this pandemic couldn't be able to teach us something?
Yeah, I think first, let me say that in terms of what's happening in the world and the lack of leadership and or unity and or an unclear understanding of the issues, most of the leaders, this is generic, I'm not pointing at any country, they are busy protecting their own seat in their country, making sure they stay on and making sure they win the election. So that is one factor which is impacting everything. Now, on the pandemic, when it started, most people thought it would never touch them. So it's something happening in Africa or Asia, part of China. In this case, if you remember, it started in China, in Wuhan. So everybody was sitting very quietly, not knowing that the global atmospherics of the world have no borders. And till it hit them, they really never took it seriously. Partly it is also failure of the UN. Failure of the UN in maybe a hard word, but inability of the UN to get even the P5 together, leave alone the whole UN. Because there's mistrust between the P5. That's where the thing starts. The plant is growing. The mistrust plant is growing. That brings us back to what you started with. Why is it so? Because of lack of leadership. If you had good leaders, they would bring each other together. Also, none of the P5 people said, hey, for example, Russia could have said, US could have said, well, actually, I consider, I've always used this, and some people get upset, but forgive me, there is really the P3. P5 is a generous term. P3 is really where the rubber meets the road. United States, Russia, China. These three drive everything today. The other two in the P5 are accidents of history. So what do we do? Lack of trust, lack of, in the United States now you see lack of trust within the country. Trump is saying something, others are saying others. Last night he said he had that medicine, the quinine. Did you see that?
Correct. Yes, he's using that almost like a couple of weeks.
No, but last night they officially debated it yesterday. He said, I have had that. And the press said, really, you had that? He said, yes. Implying, weren't you told not to? So anyway, the point is now in a pandemic, we can point fingers at many things, but one or two things come to mind immediately. And then we can go into how do we fix it. First of all, the WHO the World Health Organization is the UN body which looks at cross-border issues of pandemics. They were silent for such a long time, and I have never met this gentleman. I shook hands with him probably sometimes at the General Assembly, but I don't know him. Nothing really came this was a time when all the governments would be chasing him. Hey, get together, let's go. No, everybody started their own. I wouldn't blame Trump or anybody. Every country was trying to do that. WHO was missing in action. And the Secretary General could have done much and taken charge and said, look, Mr. WHO, this is a global problem. We have to get a task force together, get 6 heads of state together, blah, 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 and let's fix it. Or 10 heads of state together, make everybody get bigger countries and all that. We tried it. I did tell you that Kofi Annan, you remember Kofi, God bless him.
I met him in he was one of the mentors in my first international conferences.
Excellent. So Kofi spoke to about 10 or 12 of us. We were all prime ministers or presidents. And he said, let's get so-and-so, and they said, and he said, I've also chosen Shaukat. They said, why? He said, because he's the only guy who had a senior position in the private sector. Citibank is not a small bank. And he was reporting to the chairman and head of Asia Pacific from Australia to just short of India, because as Pakistani, India went to Middle East in my time. So anyway, so he was the one who saw these various cross-border issues arising, Kofi. But, now the Secretary General's clout and the Trump attitude towards the UN also is such that it does not allow even the WHO to play a part. And, so we need some step back, think about it. What will be the role of the WHO? What can they do? Are they well funded? Were they headed by the right person? Or was it a quota? Let's give it to X because, that'll look nice politically. That doesn't make organizations. You got to have professionals and good people. So anyway, the entity which was looking at this pandemic was semi-asleep. And they were really not a collection of world-class people who could tackle this. So I think if the head of the WHO called Trump, he would not take the call. Probably. I may be wrong, but so it's just making the point that the people you put in those positions should have some health background, and they must have some charisma and ability to communicate. So nothing, even till today, you can go to your archives and see his press conferences in the last 6 to 8 weeks. He did 1 or 2, and you will judge for yourself. So people really, I think the world has changed from multilateral to totally individual thinking on issues. This is a failure of all of us, of the UN, of the people, because everybody's saying, hey, it doesn't affect me. Yes, it's an issue. We'll give it some lip service. So what you need is the P5, in my humble view, really saying, we will look at it on such issues. Now, pandemic has taught us a lesson. Now, in a way, I shouldn't say this. It's good that the US also got into this. Otherwise, it was always Africa, Asia, smallpox, chickenpox. Those were the diseases at that time. Now it's not recognizing any borders, nothing. 2 Security Council permanent members are directly involved, US and China. Russia is quiet on this, you notice. And then you have UK and you have the 5th, yeah. So I think we need to use this opportunity, and I'm really impressed that you are looking at it in this way. I'm very, very, very happy you are doing that. This is a golden opportunity to look at how we restructure the WHO, how we'll restructure part of the UN. I know this is a tall order because Kofi, as I told you, Kofi asked all of us, we formed a group of 8 to reform these things. And believe me, every step, he wanted it, but the P5 had nothing to do with it. They said, no, keep everything. There was some merit, keep as it is. If you try to open the screws and you won't find the thing to put back, and the whole UN will be in jeopardy. So, to summarize this long-winded comment to your question, lack of leadership, lack of awareness, but in crisis, you create opportunities to remind people that we could change, we should. So now, if I were the UN Secretary General, I would be sitting with the P5 every week and saying, look, we've got to do something. There has to be pressure on them. And I don't know who out of the P5 would have the guts to stand up and say it. Obviously, if we get 3 countries, everybody else would fall in line. Which are the 3? United States, China, Russia. Soviet Union, sorry, Soviet Union. So these 3 should be the core. I would not go to 4, 5, 6, 80 people, everybody saying me, me, me. We can have a big session in the General Assembly, but you've been there, I've been there, we've all spoken there, we've all participated. It's too huge a group. Half the people are on their phones, half the people are talking to each other, and some people do listen. So I think the Secretary General has to be also part of this. P3 plus Secretary General.
I do agree with you, in terms about the leadership. That's definitely.
No, I'm giving tactical stuff. Strategic, we can talk in a minute.
Definitely, because it's correct. But I was once with Boutros Ghali, former Secretary General of UN.
I know, very good guy.
Yes, and he told me that he been dismissed by US, and he been very upset, and he was telling that no matter of anything, there should be a restructure. UN should be restructured because only 5 countries. Having 1 country to say no, and with that everything goes nowhere.
The Kofi Annan group, which I told you, in which I was there, remember I just mentioned to you, for restructure. This is exactly what their mandate was. But it died when it started because the P5 had nothing, they didn't want anything to do with it. And remember, Kofi Annan was a giant of a man. He was no ordinary Secretary General. You agree with me, I hope. He was really, he stood out. Dag Hammarskjöld and Kofi Annan. These were the 2 greats. So all that work was done. It must be there somewhere. And there was one person helping us, which name just came to me. I'm mentioning it because it'll escape me again. Mark Malloch Brown. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Mark Malloch Brown was the British permanent representative to the so he was appointed the sort of secretary of this effort I told you about, restructuring the UN. So Mark maybe still, he lives in London, I live in London, I can trace him and get you 2 linked up. And I hope he's healthy and all that. I'll check today or tomorrow. I'll get my secretary on it as we finish, after we finish. So tomorrow I'll speak to him. And he was Assistant Secretary General of the UN, but he was British. And British, while technically a small country, but a P5, of course, they are masters at maneuvering in a good way, positive way, these P5 types to get to some result. So we worked, but Kofi then said, guys, these my P5 guys, nobody wants to change and blah, blah, blah. And the day you touch we should exclude reform of the Security Council totally. Otherwise, you create a battle which will never close. Are you with me?
Yes, definitely. I do.
Why? Because these 5 privileges are the crown princes. And they will not allow a 6th crown prince or a watering down of that. Many people said you should have some small countries, maybe you have some of these countries. It'll kill it. As much as I don't like it, the P5, but that gives it some clout. Now, why did it not really perform as much? Because it's a failure of the Secretary General. He or she has to do it. And Mark Malloch Brown can give you some good views. I'll try to locate him, go to see him, and try to put the 3 or 4 of us or whoever you want together. Because he's no longer there and we can get the inside view, if you know what I mean.
Definitely. We've been doing like for the last, it's our like 20 or 30 video conference call, which we are organizing and then making like a joint video conferences. And what we are understanding now, it's like, you know, every country is isolated. It's in its own island. With its own borders, no one traveling and no one wants to do so. But
Zoom has solved that problem.
But the good thing is what I saw, like, you know, the Gordon Brown or Helen Clark or yourself or Bayrevika Freberga, Tarja Halonen, you know, this kind of people started like, you know, former leaders. They are understanding the important role and they are taking the leadership. Letters, statements.
We are trying.
But still, yes, that's true. We are trying. How it's successful, it's not sure.
Not clear.
But,
because we don't have the full P3 together yet. P3 meaning Russia, China, and United States. And I think the world is dying for something like a P5 really talking to each other. But with Trump, will he allow it or not? You have to guess. You have to tell me that. My view is that it'll not be easy. But if we don't fight for it, we will never get anywhere.
But yeah, definitely, that's an issue. Like, you know, every step is going to, it's a little bit drop, it's a little bit beat to something.
Yeah.
So, Prime Minister, you are now based in Europe, not European Union anymore, but in Europe.
In London.
Yes. What do you think about the European?
And Dubai.
Sorry?
And Dubai also.
Oh, okay. That's nice. And what do you think about the European solidarity, if they could be able to do so? Because the biggest concern for everyone after Chancellor Merkel, she leaves, who will be leaving? Because she's the only force who takes the lead and she gives money, she initiates all the projects.
She is special, but the others are not.
And she doesn't get credit for that.
No, she doesn't get credit for that, but she doesn't care. She is really a fantastic person, and she believes in the European sort of grouping and sharing and caring for each other. But her time is coming to an end too. She's not getting younger by the day. Also, my good friend Schroeder was, you know him?
Yes.
Yeah. We have done some work together on China and helped China. So I knew him when he was Chancellor. And I was the first Prime Minister to get an official invitation to visit Germany. Working visit, you can go. And he said, Shaukat, you got to come. Pakistan and Germany, we don't talk much to each other. And I'll make it I'm not head of state, I was head of government. But he said, we'll make it a very special trip. And all the eyebrows of the old style bureaucrats in the Foreign Office there and ours were, what the hell is going on? Because he believed he's a globalist. He's a globalist. But his health is not good. You know that.
But the problem is, like, it seems like today what we are lacking is a long-term vision. everyone is having a vision like, you know, I'm going to say something now and it will affect me for a couple of days, and no one cares about, like, you know,
Exactly.
years later. Like, yeah, last time when I was talking with President Constantinescu from Romania, he was talking about late President Aliyev and Demirel of Turkey. How they almost 10 years, 20 years ago, the first Silk Road project, and presented it.
Exactly.
That's now what we are missing, a leadership issue.
By the way, Silk Road, Pakistan was at the end of it. You know that.
Yes. Yeah. And Pakistan is doing really very good on pandemic issue, because with the numbers, it's not sure, like, you know, if because of the testing is bad, it's not enough available, but it shows that it's doing quite normal.
Yeah, they are trying. They are, I must say. I spent the whole day yesterday on it with some of them. They are trying very much, and inshallah, things should look better. But their capacity is limited. You know, over the years, this thing has happened universally, and I'd be very interested in your view. Over the years, the quality of bureaucracies and people were posted in different ministries is not what it was 10 years ago. You know, at least in countries I have, Pakistan is one example. Even India. India has the biggest, I think the best human capital of many countries. But even they talk to their bureaucracy, their foreign office is superb. But some of the ministries I talked to, they were much better than their neighbors, us. But they still aren't at the, you know, those bright Indians you'll meet in the private sector. You don't see many in government. Anyway, but I think going forward, what you've touched on is, in a way, is the UN the right body to look at cross-border issues? If so, are they working at an optimal level? If so, do they have the right people? And most importantly, is there general consensus that we need to do something to improve? That will be the big challenge, the last thing I said, because the P3 or P5 are sitting pretty. They will guard that nest very carefully, the 5 people. And they will not allow the 6th. You can ask Mrs. Merkel, she'll love to be in the Security Council, but they will never allow. Because if they open one, India is waiting. Australia will say, hey, we are also, you know, got some things which we should look at. So it will take a big leader to convince everybody and take them along. And one of those key people has to be the Secretary General of the UN, but he or she alone cannot do it. You need 5 leaders of the P5 and then a couple of others. But we should talk about it. We should institutionalize this challenge to the world. Look at it as a challenge to the world to restructure the UN to make it more optimum, more productive. And the pandemic gives us the right timing. Your call is at the right time. Your thinking is at the right time. You may have thought about this much before, but now you are seeing this broken. The rope is broken in many ways. And we could look at the WHO, that's a UN body, why they couldn't predict, why they couldn't do anything. How many times did the head of WHO go to Wuhan when the Chinese problem was happening? I don't know the answer, but I'd love to find out. And I sit on a couple of Chinese boards, so next time I bump into them, I'll ask them, when did he come? I don't think they opened up to anybody. China is, you know, very protective, as countries tend to be. But we have to find the right key to the door.
Definitely, but isn't so? It's so difficult. Everyone to understand that. I mean, America. We love US. We love always to go to New York and to have an Fifth Avenue, like, you know, walking or Central Park, and to join these UN meetings. But the reality is so that US is no more a superpower. It's superpower, but it has a competitor like China, and it's no way. It's not possible. Like, it's not 100 to 200 years ago that you can protect yourself with Chinese walls and it will be okay for you. Because economy and transfers and transits and financial obligations is so complicated that it's not possible, and it's a huge market. For companies to remove their factories from China, it will take billions or $trillions. And why it's not possible, like, you know, to sit down and to talk, just only to have personal ego.
But that's Trump. Need I say more? But that will change sometime, you know. There's an election coming, but we have to find the right people to make the noise in a good way, of reform of the UN, of reform of some of these, using the pandemic as an issue to say, look, guys, this is not a power play. This is not a we, they. Let's think of our coming generations. Let's have a system. What did WHO do? Did they succeed? Were their antenna working? When the radar was working, when this thing was just starting? Nothing. They issued some press notes and all that. The chairman of, the head of WHO should have been all over the world, every network. Look, guys, wake up. And he would have got 2 or 3 heads of state out of that, the 5 big ones, to support him. But he was never there. So I think because of the way the UN structured, you really need to bring this whole thing together. Time is now, because we are facing the pandemic.
I mean, it seems that...
But we have to give alternatives. We can't just say, hey, you are messed up. You didn't do well. No, this is the right structure. Do this.
Yeah, and I think that's also important. Leaders like you, it's a time, like, you know, former leaders whose voice and whose opinion is accepted by everyone, is to raise their voices in order, like, you know, to make the change. Because otherwise, nothing.
Yeah, but you can do it, but one person cannot. I would suggest a group of at least 10 people, which should have, it could be 12, it could be 10, United States, the P5 goes without saying. So you don't have to repeat all that. And then you have one big power from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, I think. I know others may, UAE may like to be there too, but I think Saudi is bigger. I love the UAE, don't get me wrong. I live there, by the way. My second home is Dubai, in case you didn't know. We have a cottage there and we go and spend time there. And my daughter lives there. Daughter, son-in-law, grandchildren, etc. So I have some attachment to the UAE. And they're great people. But UAE and or Saudi, these are too big in the Middle East. We need somebody from Central Asia, whether it's Azerbaijan, you have to come up with names. But it can't be a big, it can't be a 50 people. It has to be, and with the country comes the individual.
Yes.
Are you with?
Otherwise, it will be like, endless talk.
Yeah, some official who gets fired in 6 months, then somebody else comes, he says, what am I doing here? No, it has to be selection, personal selection. Like Kofi did in those days, remember? I was just telling you. And he's gone. I miss him. He was one of my mentors. He had the right DNA and everything. But if we can get Mark, I have to check. Actually, I haven't seen him in a while. I will tell my secretary today after this to check Mark Malik Brown, Deputy Secretary General at that time. But much bigger than, he's a really, for what you're saying, he's an ideal person. And we can get, obviously, if the former Secretary General were alive, we would get him, but he's gone. So we have to come up with some really good people who, in selection people for things like this, you have not to see only the size of the country important. but can they carry the weight themselves, or do they have to get 6 people behind them to write every word they speak?
Like Amr Musa, Egypt is not as big a country like France or Italy or US.
Amr Musa is excellent.
Yes.
I would, because he's also articulate and he has credibility. I would, if you ask me to make a list, he would definitely be there.
He's one of the genius.
Yes, he is. He is, of course, like an elder brother to me. We are very.
He's a close friend, definitely. The last question, what I would like to ask today.
And you need somebody from Africa, because Amr Musa will be considered Middle East. So you need some more, and you can create subcommittees. You can have 20 people plus others. So that once you do that, you can do it. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No worries. As a last question, I would like just to ask you about what today we saw is big countries couldn't be able to manage with a good healthcare. Like, I mean, we all used to go or dream to go to Italy, Switzerland, or France, or London to have a medical treatments, or America. But today, that countries are filled with that. But countries like, small countries like Azerbaijan or Georgia or like, this neighborhood, Latvia, it managed it even better with less casualties, with less deaths, and with less. Why it's happening?
Why it's happening? Because you have good leadership. Let's be specific. Azerbaijan. I don't know your number. I assume the numbers look good.
Yes, it's around 30 deaths.
How many?
30.
Oh, great. I shouldn't say great, it's bad, but 30 is amazing. That's fantastic. So, why? Number one, leadership. Number two, level of education. What's the literacy rate? Tell me.
It's 95. 95,
See,
90.
I was hoping you would say 100 to 95 or 90. So my theory is that education helps. Even you may have Aristotle, anybody as the head. If you don't, your leader educated your people, right?
Yes, definitely.
And without that, I can't say that for my country. We have smart people, but if you take a poll, the percentage is very low. And it's a huge country, nuclear power, blah, blah, blah. But so that's where you are. Education is your biggest strength.
Yeah,
and that's part of this effort, or some effort, that for God's sake, which countries are not investing today? We must tell them through our forum, which is easier to, by the way, get results on the board than the first issue we raised today, the pandemics. That has many, it's like a whale with 6 legs. But the education one and literacy one is really can be acted upon quickly. You don't need $5 billion or anything. You need leadership, the ability to execute these programs. And there too, UN can play a major part. Also, I would get somebody like Jeffrey Sachs. Do you know Jeffrey?
He is our member.
Yes, good. So I'm on Jeffrey's board, and I tell you, we do a lot of phone meetings also. We haven't done Zoom. We did one Zoom. Sorry, what am I saying? 2 weeks ago, we did a Zoom, 2 or 3 weeks ago. People like that who think out of the box, we need.
Yeah.
So I'm on his board, and really, when I go there, I learn interesting things. Particularly he himself, is an exceptional individual.
Definitely. So, we have really lots of people like, Jeffrey Sachs, Kerry Kennedy, yourself, Talia.
No. We are small followers, catalysts maybe. Yeah, forget us. But Jeffrey is class, and He asked me to join his board. I said, I can't say no to you. So I'm enjoying his board meetings. They really, and we do it most on, by the way.
Okay, he joined our meeting almost, I think that it was
He came once.
7 days ago, but it was a big conference, like, you know, with Vaira, President Vaira, and Miss Kerry Kennedy, Dr. Ismail.
Yes.
It was
So he was there.
Yeah, he was there, and he definitely, we are planning to host another one, because the ceasefire letter which we prepared for the UN and the world leaders, and we are now preparing the second phase of that. And we want to, like, you know.
No, I'm a big fan of Jeffrey. I sit on his board, so I learn. Every time I sit there, I learn something. And his wife is very, you met her?
Miss Sonia.
Yeah, he's lovely.
I will inform him. I will send him a message right after the conference, the call.
Anytime. I'm a big Jeffrey fan, by the way.
He is really one of the top intellectuals.
Yes.
Everyone needs his support and his presence.
He's terrific.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time. It was so nice to meet you.